Alright, so let's talk about the Gambler's False Shuffle. So this is actually a full deck false riffle shuffle. And in my experience, and in other people's experience, especially people who have actually known this move for quite a while, this is actually a pretty bad move. Like, this is actually a pretty horrible move. But, you know, over the course of this video, I'll actually explain the mechanics behind the move, as well as why this move is actually, well, let's just say not preferable compared to other full false deck riffle shuffle, full deck false riffle shuffle. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the history behind this move. So the move, in terms of mechanics, I would actually say is a combination of two pretty distinct moves. So I would say that the false shuffle itself comes from, I would say, an Erdnase move. And the Erdnase move is blind shuffles retaining entire order fourth method. That's a mouthful, I know, but it's basically a Greek shuffle that I won't do the false variation, but I'll just briefly show you what it actually looks like, what a Greek shuffle actually looks like. You'll actually see people do this sort of deal sometimes, but that's what a Greek shuffle looks like. And obviously, because it's Erdnase, it was published back in 1902 in the Expert at the Card table. The false square up of the move actually comes from, well, I would say comes from MJ Oink's false shuffle. So that's the false shuffle's name. So MJ Oink's false shuffle by MJ Oink, and yeah, it was published in Riffle Shuffle Technique Part 3 back in 1984 by Carl Fulves. And nowadays it's just called the Oink Shuffle, and I do quite like it. So the Gambler's False Shuffle is sort of this weird hybrid between the two, but it's also neither of those two as well. So it's similar to the Erdnase move, but it's also Riffle Shuffle. It's also similar to the Oink Shuffle, but the Oink Shuffle is a real riffle with a false square up. But this move is actually a false, well, it's a false shuffle and a false square up as well. And okay, well, enough about the other moves. Let's talk about the history of the move itself. This move, the Gambler's False Shuffle. So this move was first published, to my knowledge, in Expert Card Technique back in 1940 by G. Newgard and Frederick Browie. The move is not credited, but as we've gone through Expert Card Technique, we've come to know that, well, uncredited moves are most likely, well, Di Vernon or Charlie Miller's moves. I doubt that this move is actually from either of those two. I think that this is probably just something that one of those contributors actually heard about and just decided to toss in, because, you know, this move is definitely interesting and doesn't really suit any magician style. So I think that this is pretty interesting. So I'll actually read a passage from the book. Quote, "And yet it's reported to be used in certain card games south of the border," unquote. So this is interesting because, well, who is reporting this, right? So if there are reports of this, doesn't that mean that whoever was using this was caught? So this is an interesting shuffle, because I doubt any magician actually sort of used it. And, you know, it's, I doubt any gamblers would actually sort of use it as well. So where does this move really come from? Unfortunately, we don't really know. So that's that for the history section. Just a weird move published in one of the most famous card magic books out there. So, yeah. So before we go into the mechanics of the false shuffle itself, I want to go into the riffle shuffle itself, because this actually uses a different riffle shuffle grip than the one that I taught on the Guide to Shuffling Cards video. So if you actually remember what it actually looked like on the one that I taught before, I'll do it without speaking, just so that you can actually hear the difference. Right, so that was the one that I taught and the one that I currently do. I'll demonstrate what the one that you need to know for this move sounds like and looks like. So right from the get-go, you can see and you can hear a difference. So I'll explain what those differences are in terms of mechanics. So you're going to start the exact same way. You're going to split the deck in half. It really doesn't really sort of matter how you split the deck. I'll go into more of those finer details later on when I explain the mechanics of the move. But for now, we're just talking about the shuffle itself. So you're going to split the deck as per usual with the overlap. But now, what you'll notice is that my hands are actually shifted upwards more into the deck, right? So when I do the regular riffle shuffle, the edges of my palms are actually touching the table over here. So they're actually contacting the table, right? Most of my palm is actually contacting the table. Here, because I'm shifting my hand upwards, now the edge of my palm is actually touching the edge of the deck over here, right? So both of my palms are actually somewhat on top of the edge of the deck over here. Alright, and the main reason why they're actually shifted upwards is because rather than my thumb riffling off the center of the cards over here, they're actually riffling off of these corners. So they're actually going to move upwards, and now I'm riffling off of the corners over here. Alright, so what you'll notice is that by doing so, when I shuffle the cards, the sound becomes completely different. It sounds a lot more aggressive. And the reason why it actually sounds more aggressive is because to clear the cards of this overlap, you need to raise the cards, the corners a lot more, right? Versus just lifting the cards very gently, right? So this shuffling position actually has two main advantages. Well, one is that it actually provides a lot more cover for these for the corners that are being shuffled, right? Because now, instead of being out in the open where everyone can see them, because you have your fingers covering this corner over here, when you execute any sort of false shuffle, these fingers will act as a sort of smoke screen so that you can't actually see the cards being overlapped. So now, well, any false shuffle will have additional cover. The second advantage is that because you're riffling these cards from the corner, you can actually see the indices of these cards. So if you're doing any sort of riffle culling, then you can actually see the cards, the indices of the cards go by as you riffle, and then you could do whatever move that you want, and this can actually act as a peek as well, right? So if I just withhold it, you can actually see the top card, right? So those are two advantages that this move that this sort of different shuffle provides. But later on, I'll actually explain why this sort of shuffle is not preferable, even though it has two main advantages. But for now, I actually like you to concentrate on the sound it makes as well. So this is the original shuffle. And then this is the shuffle, the modified riffle shuffle, that's higher up. So this is what we call a high and open riffle shuffle. And you can see that the first one is a lot softer, right? It's sort of like a soft drizzle. And this one is more like a thunderous rain. So yeah, there is a sound quality to it. So again, this is, in terms of like profile, so in terms of look and in terms of sound, it's completely different. So that is something you have to take into account as well. But that's going to be it for the riffle shuffle. Let's go into the main mechanics behind the false shuffle itself. So I just need to switch decks real fast because, well, that deck was not in new deck order. So, you know, this deck is in new deck order for learning purposes. All right. So to begin the false shuffle, you're going to split the deck in half. The top half goes to the right and the bottom half goes to the left. All right. and you'll actually form this overlap with the top half on top of the bottom half, like so. Actually, you know what, I'll do what can I do? So I'll actually do the I'll flip the Ace of Hearts upwards and also flip the King of Diamonds upwards. All right, so what's going to happen is that when I split these packets, so the King of Diamonds packet is the bottom packet and the Ace of Hearts packet is the one that's on top. So when I split these packets, the top half is going to go on top with the overlap. All right, so what's going to do now, what you're going to do now is that you're going to execute the Riffle Shuffle. So you're going to execute the Riffle Shuffle, but now what happens is that you're going to begin the shuffle, but you don't weave any cards together. So what actually happens is that you're actually just shuffling the packets one on top of another. I'm not even kidding. That is the main mechanics of the move. So you're not even shuffling the cards properly. So what you're actually going to do is that you're going to have the overlap, and as you execute the shuffle, you're just going to start riffling the cards from the bottom left hand, like so. Bottom left packet, like so, right? And as you begin this riffle, you're just going to start riffling cards from your right hand on top of this packet as well. And through this motion, well, you're going to seemingly get an even riffle of the two packets together. All right, so this is what it's meant to emulate. Right, so this is what it's meant to emulate, right? You have an actual weave, but the shuffle is a false riffle. So you start riffling from the left hand, and then you start riffling from the right hand as well. And this packet, so I don't know if I can get, okay, I'll do it without the cover. So this is what's actually happening. I'm riffling from the left hand, and then I'm riffling from the right hand on top of the left packet. So that's basically the main mechanics of the shuffle. There's not really, I know I call it mechanics, but there's hardly any mechanics because you're just riffling cards independently, right? So that's what you're going to do. So what you'll notice over here is that when you riffle the right packet over here, it actually hits the edge of the of this packet over here. It'll actually hit the edge of the bottom left packet. That's fine, because after you're done riffling this packet over here, everything just falls back into place. All right, so it's fine if this packet hits this edge, right? I think the book actually recommends you to riffle the left hand first and then riffle the right hand, but it causes this weird disjointed moment of having one riffle and then two riffles, right? I prefer having two simultaneous riffles. That way it's harder to distinguish between the two separate moments. So now that you're done executing the false riffle shuffle, all you're going to do now is that because the edges of your palm are already contacting the edge of the deck over here, what you're going to do is that now you're just going to use the edge of your palm to just push these packets together, right? So you're just going to execute the false riffle shuffle, and then you're just going to push these two packets together, like so. And you're just going to square up the two packets. What you're going to notice is that when I square these packets up, my left hand fingers actually ride on top of my right hand fingers. So it's basically doing the opposite of the packets, right? So this one is the right packet rides on top of the left hand packet. Here, my left fingers ride on top of my right hand, right? So it goes like this, and then you could coalesce everything together, right? In this weird, like, I don't know, this weird motion, I guess. So it just rides on top of your right hand fingers, like so. And so this will provide additional cover for the cards for the square up, because when you notice, well, this is not very deceptive. Having the two packets square up like this is not very deceptive because you have two giant blocks over here. And this move is not a cut. So, you know, that's not exactly the best. But having more cover to the move makes it seem like a genuine push in a square up rather, and you'll actually realize that because of the overlap, right, because of the two packets are already one on top of another, when you push these two packets in, this top packet rides on top of this bottom packet, and then you have a nice square up, even though there is no legitimate shuffle that's being done. So that's the false shuffle. I know. So it's very different from usual false riffle shuffles, because usual false riffle shuffles are actually a real riffle shuffle followed by a false square up. So when you actually look at the case of a false zero shuffle, the false zero shuffle, a zero shuffle is a real it's a real weave, right? But it's the square up that's false. It's the same thing with a push in shuffle. The square up, it's a real shuffle followed by a false square up, or rather, it's a real square up, but it's just a bit tricky, I would say. So this move is very different because the shuffle is false as well as the square up. So this is a very unique shuffle. But here's just a minor tip to just give the shuffle a bit more cover. So if you notice that you're doing this move and the two corners that are not overlapping are actually flashing, what you can do is that you can actually move your middle finger, your left middle finger, and just contact the right middle finger over here. And this will by default just bring in your fingers together and cause some sort of shield to it, right? So before it looked like this, but now when you overlap your fingers, it'll give a lot more cover to the front edge of the cards, like so. All right, so that's just a brief tip on how to add more cover to the move, right? Just overlapping your fingers like so, and then you could still do the false square up like so, right? So that's just a brief tip. But let's go over the legitimacy of the move, because you've seen the move. It's a pretty interesting move where everything is false. But is it an actual false shuffle that gamblers use? Here's why I actually don't think so. Let's go into the shuffle itself, right? Sorry, let me switch decks. So we're using a high and open shuffle. According to Steve 40, so you know Steve 40, that guy, the authoritative guy on pretty much gambling stuff, I would say, a high open shuffle is pretty frowned upon in games, right? Because again, this gives more cover to the riffle shuffle, and it also allows you to peek cards as you're shuffling through them, right? Those are two advantages that are very good for magicians. But advantages are not good things in like card games, because you never want a certain person to have an advantage over the other person. So in terms of gambling, why would you want to have a shuffle that gives you two advantages? You'll get pretty much beat up on the spot, or worse. So having the advantages in a gambling game is not necessarily the best thing. So a high open shuffle is, it's already kind of dubious for the start of the move, right? But here's another reason as to why this move is actually dubious at best. So I'll actually read a passage from the book, so from Expert Card Technique. So, quote, "The entire shuffle should be made without hesitation, and while the operator converses with the spectators," unquote. So the book recommends you to do the move with misdirection, which is weird because money is on the line. Shouldn't at least one of those players who are kind of concerned with their livelihood actually be looking at the cards, right? And like not look elsewhere, not be looking at people, because, well, if my money is on the line, I would be concentrating on the instrument of my money and try and see if there's any instruments of foul play. So it is weird that, they recommend you use misdirection for this move, even though it's a gambling move, and realistically you wouldn't necessarily have any sort of misdirection for a card game. So it's weird, right? And like I said in the history section, if there are reports of this move being used, then whoever is doing this move isn't doing them properly, because there's reports of this move being used. If this move is actually as good as it claims to be, then realistically there shouldn't be any reports, because they should just fly by like everyone. But the fact that there are reports means that, they got caught, and that's not the best thing, because gamblers do not want to get caught for foul play, because that's never good news. So anyways, I highly doubt that this move was actually used, because there's just nothing about this move that makes sense, even in terms of history, in terms of context, and just in terms of mechanics. So everything about this move is kind of weird. So yeah. But if you actually want to learn any sort of proper, false shuffles, but there are a couple of sources that I want you to sort of look up. So the first one is, Z by Steve Reynolds, or Z by Steve Reynolds, depending on whatever region. It's just a Z with a period by Steve Reynolds. So there he goes over all the mechanics of all the main mechanics behind the Zero Shuffle, and it's where I learned my Zero Shuffle from. And honestly, I could not ask for a better teacher. I will constantly rep for this download or DVD, because it is that good. So yeah. There's also The Expert Card Conjuring by Alton Sharp. It's a book that's still being sold today. I believe it's sold as an ebook on library, so you can go ahead and look that up. There's also Las Vegas Cardma by Alan Ackerman. It's Alan Ackerman. Do I really need to say more? There's also Lint by John Luca. There's Card College Volume 3 by Roberto Giobbi. It's Card College. You should always know what Card College is. And then there's also the Table False Shuffle Project by Eddie McCall. So there he goes over a bunch of various false shuffles, including the push-in, I believe. So yeah, that's going to be it for all the resources that I can recommend. Obviously, there's a lot more. I'll probably just link them in the comments down below. So yeah, you can go ahead and check those out. So this is not a good move, as you've discovered throughout the video. It's not the best of moves, and it is a very dubious move, but it is sort of interesting to see what are the moves of the past, and see, as sleight of hand and as like gambling sleight of hand actually progressed, how these sort of moves, it sort of helped dispel myths about moves and whatnot, and how we've refined moves to such a high degree nowadays, right? Which is sort of interesting. And yeah, I just find it really interesting that there's still so many weird moves littered around in magic books in general. So yeah, I highly recommend you to read Expert Card Technique, because they're, again, like, it's a great book, and you also see like some weird discrepant moves here and there. So that's the best way I can describe them. But yeah, that's gonna be it for today. Thanks for hanging out with me, and yeah, stay healthy, stay safe, and see you guys next time.